hit the streets of Puerto Vallarta, the Mexican state of Jalisco, and beyond Sunday, as Mexico's most notorious drug cartel fiercely retaliated after soldiers killed their leader.
I gotta go figure out what the hell's going on downstairs. There's the car that they sent on fire and the two buses.
Within hours of El Mencho's death, a man put out a bounty on every soldier in Mexico, lit 20 states on fire, and got 74 people killed.
The reaction from his cartel has been immediate and violent. Unverified pictures, thought to be filmed in Puerto Vallarta on the Jalisco coast, show plumes of smoke rising over the tourist hotspot. And there's destruction across Mexico.
Later, he was killed. He was found with $1 million in cash and shot dead. That man was El Tuli. Hugo César Macías Ureña, better known as El Tuli, El Cinco, or Julio, was the logistics and money man behind the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. More than that, he was El Mencho's right-hand man. Not just his worker, nor an ordinary operator, he was someone El Mencho trusted deeply. Unlike many cartel figures who become famous while they're alive, El Tuli stayed almost completely hidden. Nobody really knew his face. There were no public photos of him before his death. He moved quietly, always in El Mencho's shadow. For years, he operated like a ghost. The public only really heard his name when chaos broke out and the cartel made headlines across Mexico. El Tuli worked his way up inside CJNG step by step. He started by recruiting young men into the organization. He trained sicarios, taught them how to handle weapons, and helped build armed cells. Over time, he took on more responsibility. He moved from recruiter and trainer to field commander. Eventually, he became one of the most powerful operational leaders in the cartel. On top of that, he oversaw financial operations. He wasn't just fighting battles now, he was also managing money, logistics, and strategy. His bond with El Mencho went beyond business. He was described as his compadre, a godfather-style relationship in Mexican culture that's deeper than regular friendship. It's loyalty tied with personal trust. Narco Corridos even highlighted that connection. A 2020 song by Ruta, 200 Norteño Banda, described him as the trusted friend of the one with the M, saying he wouldn't trade him for anyone. Another corrido, El Tulipan, by Martin Castillo, painted him as a loyal compadre who stood beside the Lord of the Roosters in both good times and bad. The lyrics focused on loyalty during crises and how they always came out on top in the worst battles. Officially, Mexican military intelligence labeled El Tuli as part of the cartel's armed operational wing, not the financial brain. But in reality, he was both. He acted as the link between El Mencho and regional coordinators across different states. He had the freedom to carry out orders on his own. In many ways, he functioned like a chief of staff, financial officer, and battlefield commander all at once. Authorities first connected his name to major investigations in 2018 after one of his direct subordinates, known as Juan Pistolas, was arrested.
Omar Garcia Harfus announced the arrest of two alleged members of the Jalisco Nueva Generación cartel. One of them is named Juan Francisco Aguilar, who is nicknamed Juan Pistolas and who is presumed to be the head of hitmen for this criminal organization.
That arrest exposed parts of El Tuli's network. Even so, El Tuli stayed free and continued operating inside El Mencho's inner circle for years after that. There were also claims that he had been detained at different times. According to songs and reports, he was pressured and even tortured, but never cooperated with authorities. No matter the pressure, he stayed silent. For years, he remained loyal, powerful, and mostly invisible. But eventually, one event would change everything and turn his story in a completely different direction. On February 20th, 2026, Mexican forces got a solid tip. The information reportedly came from someone connected to one of El Mencho's romantic partners. It was detailed enough to move fast and get Mencho grounded for good.
On February 20, for Central Military Intelligence work, a trusted associate was located, one of the romantic partners of El Mencho, who transported her to a facility in the town of Tapalpa, Jalisco.
By February 21st, that partner had left the cabin complex where El Mencho had been staying on the outskirts of Tapalpa, Jalisco. But El Mencho himself didn't leave. He remained there with his armed security team, likely believing the location was still secure. Before sunrise on February 22nd, the operation began. Mexico's Air Force teamed up with the National Guard's Special Immediate Reaction Force. Helicopters moved in. Ground troops surrounded the area and locked down the perimeter.
On Sunday, Mexico's special forces led a military operation to arrest Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, or El Mencho, in Tapalpa in central western Jalisco state.
Once forces closed in, El Mencho's lieutenants opened fire. A heavy exchange followed. While one unit kept the guards busy, a special forces team broke away and went after El Mencho directly. They tracked him into the nearby forest. He was found hiding in thick undergrowth not far from the cabin. Another firefight broke out. When it ended, El Mencho and 2 of his bodyguards were captured. All 3 were badly wounded. They were placed on a helicopter and rushed toward a hospital in Guadalajara, but none of them made it. All 3 died during the flight. Authorities even rerouted the helicopter away from Guadalajara at one point, fearing an immediate and violent cartel response if word spread too quickly. Important to note, El Mencho's rise to this point had been decades in the making. He was believed to be a former police officer from Michoacán in western Mexico. Over more than 30 years, he built a massive criminal network. In the mid-1990s, U.S. authorities convicted him on heroin trafficking charges. He served time in the United States before being deported back to Mexico. Once back, he climbed quickly through the criminal ranks. Around 2009, he founded the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known as CJNG. Under his leadership, it expanded fast and became one of the most powerful and violent cartels in Mexico. The group trafficked coke, meth, and fentanyl into the United States. It also smuggled migrants north. CJNG became known for its military-style tactics. They used armored vehicles, armed drones, improvised explosive devices, and launched direct attacks on police and military forces. For months, El Mencho had a $15 million US bounty on his head. The CIA and FBI provided intelligence support in tracking him. He was considered the most wanted D-Lord in the Western Hemisphere. And now, after decades of avoiding capture, it was over. Immediately after his death, Mexican forces raided 2 properties in Tapalpa linked to him. They seized documents, handwritten notes, and computer records. Among the materials were accounting logs and what appeared to be CJNG's internal payroll records. The financial structure of the cartel was now in government hands. We'll touch on the details soon. Now, the story didn't end with his death. In fact, that's when everything exploded. Within hours of El Mencho's death, El Tuli responded, and he responded fast and brutally. Through CJNG's communication network, he issued a direct order, a bounty of 20,000 Mexican pesos, about $1,160 for every Mexican soldier killed. It wasn't limited to one state, it wasn't limited to one region. Any cartel member, anywhere in Mexico, could claim the payout. Kill a soldier, get paid. It was a standing reward. The country erupted almost immediately. Everywhere was upside down. Security forces reported around 250 to 252 roadblocks set up nationwide in a single night. CJNG members hijacked buses, cargo trucks, and private vehicles. They set them on fire and used them to block highways. Major roads across multiple states were shut down at the same time. Transportation collapsed in several regions. But it didn't stop at roadblocks. El Tuli ordered coordinated attacks on military bases and National Guard facilities. Banks were targeted, gas stations were burned, shops and government buildings were attacked. Public transportation systems were disrupted. Vehicles were torched. The goal was to overwhelm the state everywhere at once.
In response to the drug-related roadblocks and violent incidents that have occurred in several municipalities of the state of Jalisco, including vehicle burnings, motorcycle crashes, and a shooting in the city of Ixtapa.
The violence spread to at least 20 of Mexico's 32 states. The hardest hit areas included Jalisco, Michoacán, Guanajuato, Colima, Tamaulipas, Aguascalientes, Zacatecas, and Sinaloa. But reports came in from coast to coast. It wasn't isolated. It was nationwide. In Jalisco, Governor Pablo Lemus urged residents to stay home. In Guadalajara, Mexico's second-largest city, with a metro population of about 5.2 million, public life nearly stopped. Bus services were suspended. Taxi operations were halted. Intercity coaches shut down. The urban rail system closed. Airlines canceled flights to and from Guadalajara and even Puerto Vallarta. The city froze. The casualties mounted quickly. Reports confirmed between 25 and 27 National Guard troops killed in at least 6 separate ambushes across Jalisco alone. Security forces responded aggressively, killing an estimated 30 to 42 cartel members. At least one civilian death was officially confirmed, though the real number may have been higher. In total, more than 74 people were estimated dead within just 48 hours. It became one of the deadliest two-day periods in the history of Mexico's D-War. And it showed just how much power El Tuli still had, even without El Mencho alive. United States warning. As the violence spread across Mexico, the United States moved quickly. The U.S. State Department issued an official warning to all Americans in Jalisco, Tamaulipas, Michoacán, Guerrero, and Nuevo León. The message was clear: shelter in place, stay indoors, avoid the streets. U.S. government staff stationed in Mexico were also ordered not to leave their residences.
Mexico's most powerful drug kingpin was killed during a military operation. Mexican officials say criminal groups burned cars and trucks to block roads across the country. The State Department is warning Americans to shelter in place.
The warning specifically mentioned CJNG. Americans in tourist areas like Puerto Vallarta were told to stay off the roads and avoid public spaces. The situation was unpredictable, and authorities feared more attacks. But while the international warnings were going out, the Mexican military was already focused on something else: finding El Tuli, tracking down of El Tuli. Even as he was directing chaos across the country, security forces were tracing him. An Airmobile Special Forces unit from Mexico's Paratrooper Rifle Brigade was deployed with one clear objective: to locate and neutralize El Tuli. Military intelligence tracked communication signals tied to the attacks. The signals led them to El Gruyo, Jalisco, a town about 100 kilometers from Tapalpa, where El Mencho had been killed just hours earlier. That's where El Tuli had set up. From El Gruyo, he was reportedly issuing direct orders: roadblocks, vehicle burnings, attacks on military bases, the bounty on soldiers. Everything was being coordinated from that location. When paratroopers moved in, El Tuli realized the net was closing. He tried to escape in a vehicle. As he fled, he opened fire on the soldiers. The paratroopers returned fire. Immediately, the chase ended quickly. El Tuli was shot and killed. He didn't make it out. After the shooting, soldiers searched El Tuli's vehicle and his body. What they found confirmed just how high up he was in the organization. Inside the vehicle, they recovered 7.2 million Mexican pesos in cash and about $965,000. Altogether, it totaled roughly $1.4 million in mixed currency. They also found multiple firearms, including rifles and pistols. But he wasn't the only one killed. In the broader follow-up operation, 33 other alleged CJNG members were also killed. The scale of the operation was massive. By taking out El Tuli, the military effectively disrupted CJNG's ability to coordinate more nationwide retaliation. The chain of command had been hit hard. Then came the house raids hinted earlier. When Mexican forces searched El Mencho's cabin in Tapalpa, they uncovered something even bigger than weapons or cash. They found CJNG's internal financial records, handwritten ledgers, computer files, detailed payroll documents. It laid out who was being paid, how much, and for what role. El Tuli had managed this system. He was clearly the head of finances. These were his books. The payroll for the Tapalpa operation alone showed how structured everything was. Around 30 to 32 lookouts, known as halcones, were paid between 2,500 and 3,000 pesos per week, roughly $145 to $175 each. There were 26 gunmen, or sicarios, earning about 4,000 pesos weekly, around $230. Cell leaders earned up to 7,000 pesos per week, about $405. Top operators could make as much as $15,000 per month. Informants were paid between $125 and $200 per week. In December 2025 alone, the Tapalpa operation generated about 8.7 million pesos, over $500,000, from D-sales and illegal slot machine operations combined. And that was just one town. The records also showed bribe payments. There were allocations for corruption at all three levels of government. About 138,000 pesos were directed to Tapalpa's municipal police. Around 615,000 pesos were allocated to the National Guard. Additional payments were listed for state and federal officials, though specific names were not included in the documents, and Tapalpa was only a small piece of the picture. The seized documents revealed that CJNG maintained payroll systems across multiple states, covering hundreds of individuals. The records listed payments not just to gunmen and lookouts, but also to informants, hackers, and corrupt police and military personnel throughout the organization. The paperwork showed that this was violent, structured, organized, and financially managed like a business, and El Tuli had been the one keeping the system running. A lot of people have been asking what role the United States played in all of this. If we rewind a bit, President Trump had been pressuring Mexican officials for months to go after drug cartels.
The Trump administration planning a new mission to target drug cartels in Mexico. This is all according to 4 current and former U.S. officials familiar with that effort. The operation would include American troops and intelligence officers on the ground.
The U.S. was also offering up to $15 million for information that could lead to the arrest of El Mencho, which we already mentioned earlier. In December 2024, the U.S. State Department posted online that the reward for the arrest and / conviction of El Mencho had been increased. They described El Mencho as a fugitive. The post stated, "Since 2017, Oseguera Cervantes has been indicted several times in the United States for drug trafficking." It also added, "Most recently, in April 2022, Oseguera was charged with running a continuing criminal enterprise, conspiracy to manufacture and distribute methamphetamine, cocaine, and fentanyl for import into the United States, and using a firearm during drug trafficking crimes." Mexico's defense ministry said on X that, along with its own military intelligence efforts, the operation was carried out within a framework of coordination and cooperation, with the U.S.'s American authorities shared information that helped make the operation possible. White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt later confirmed on X that U.S. intelligence had provided support to the Mexican government during the operation. According to sources, El Mencho is still seen as one of the most violent and ruthless drug kingpins. His death could have been a major turning point for Mexico, the US, Latin America, and beyond. But no one expected things to spiral the way they did once El Tuli got involved.